Got a lot of stuff up here today. I'm going to share some resources with you as we close out our January sermon series today that have really been helpful to me in my life, especially in my marriage. We're going to be focusing on the marriage relationship today, but don't let that scare you. You might, well, I'm not married. Maybe you will be someday, but even if not, there are some truth principles here, I think for all of us. But really, we're going to be focused in today things that I wish I knew earlier, some resources I wish I had in my hands earlier in my marriage, and it would have helped me avoid some heartache, some conflict, some issues, some struggles. And so just want to share some of that with you today. The first book that I wish I knew about earlier was this one right here. It's called His Needs and Her Needs. And early in my marriage, a few years in, Meredith and I, we're already just kind of butting heads and struggling. And can you imagine a pastor having, I'm not supposed to have those issues, right? But we're having issues. And a good friend of mine suggested this book to me, very helpful, written by Willard F. Harley Jr. He's a clinical psychologist, marriage counselor, best-selling author. It's really a great book about how to meet each other's emotional needs. And here's what happens in this book. After interviewing thousands of couples, this psychologist and counselor really identified the top 5 needs, emotional needs that men have and women have. So it's so helpful for us to know as husbands, what are those top 5 needs, emotional needs that our wives have? For wives, it's so important for you to know those top 5 needs that your husband has, those emotional needs. And so we've got the top 5. What do y'all think, I wanted to ask you, was number 1? What was the number 1 emotional need for women? Anybody got any thoughts on that? Communication? Okay, you're close, but it's a different word in this book. Affection, there it is. The number 1 need for women is affection. And we'll talk about what that means in just a minute. What do y'all think the number 1 need for men is? Well, what does respect look like? Just say it. It's all right to say it in church. Sexual fulfillment. That's it. Okay. Number 1 for men was sex. I thought this would be a lot easier. I thought that would just kind of come out real easy. Yeah, trying to be polite in a church setting. Number 1 for women, affection. Number 1 for men, sexual fulfillment. I came across a funny YouTube short the other day from a Christian marriage conference that I think really kind of helps us get a picture of these 2 emotional needs. And this little short was called How to Win Your Wife versus How to Win Your Husband. So this is for husbands, how to win your wife. Here's what you need to do. Dine her, call her, hug her, support her, hold her, surprise her, compliment her, smile at her, listen to her, laugh with her, cry with her, romance her, believe in her, cuddle with her, shop with her, give her jewelry, buy her flowers, hold her hand, write love letters to her, care for her, protect her, be honest and open with her, go to the ends of the earth and back for her again. Women, how do you win your husband? Show up naked and bring food. It's as simple as that. His Needs, Her Needs is really, it's a great book, great resource. Also, another good one, if you're not familiar with it, is The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. It's a great book. But the book I wish I knew earlier about in my life and marriage that we're going to talk about today is this one right here, Love and Respect by Dr. Emerson Eggerichs. This book is based on just a single verse of Scripture. But this verse is powerful. It has the potential really to revolutionize our relationships. But here's kind of always the issue. We have to be willing to take the truths that we're going to learn today from this verse and actually put them into practice in our lives, in our marriages. I read the story of a guy who kind of gave a testimony. He said, my wife and I, we went to marriage conferences and we went to church and I read books and I got all this information and knowledge and facts about what I should do and what all of these things. But he said, my marriage was still terrible because I never actually did anything that I learned. And isn't that the danger for all of us? We can understand the truth, we can hear the truth, agree with it, know what we need to do, but then we never actually put it into practice. We don't change the way that we do things in our day-to-day life. And so obviously we're not going to see the results if we're not willing to do that. So let me ask you this morning, are you struggling in your marriage? Is what you've been doing working? All right, just let the Spirit speak to you. Has what you've been doing working? And if the answer is no, would you be willing to start doing some things differently? Change the way that you think or react, relate to each other. Today, I want to give you the opportunity to do something powerful for your relationship. And it's found in this single verse in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 33. So let's read this verse together this morning. Very simple, straightforward. Each man must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. That's it, right? Just simple, straightforward, two commands. Not a long verse, but these truths, I'm telling you, have the power to revolutionize your relationship because this is God's way. And if we can really turn and face that and say, you know what, my way's not working, I want to start doing it God's way, some amazing things can happen in your relationship. 2 commands. Husbands, show that love and affection to your wife that she so desperately needs. Wives, show that respect and encouragement to your husbands. Now, why do we have these commands? Why do we have these commands in this verse? Why did Paul write this letter to the Ephesians and have to give them this command? Hey, y'all need to do these things. Why do we need a command? Because we don't normally do them, right? We don't normally do these things. We're told to do things that we might not do otherwise. If you think about it, these commands are actually aimed at our weaknesses. Respect comes easily to men, doesn't it? We understand what respect means, what it looks like. It's easy for us when it comes to respect. And love, if you think about it, comes easier to women. They know what they need. They know what that kind of love that they need looks like. But it doesn't come naturally to us as men or women. There was a survey done of 7,000 people, and this question was asked: when you are in conflict with your spouse or significant other, do you feel unloved or disrespected? 83% of the men said disrespected, and 72% of the women said unloved. So do we see this kind of hitting us right where we are in our relationships today, the truth of this verse that we've already looked at? Now, here's kind of a new concept for us this morning. How many of us have ever thought of our marriage relationship as discipleship? Do you think about it that way? I want to challenge you today. We need to begin to think about this relationship. We say it all the time here at Springdale. Discipleship happens where? In relationships. It happens in relationships. So what better relationship exists on the planet Earth for us to learn how to love, practice love, to sacrifice, to live out this Jesus life that he wants us to live out in this relationship with our spouse? We need to view our marriages as discipleship. And when we do, what we're talking about then, it's going to require some discipline on our part, some effort, some choices, yielding to the Holy Spirit in real day-to-day life if we want to see this happening in this relationship. But here's the problem for us a lot of times. We think our spouse is the only one that needs to change, right? You're already listening. Some of y'all are already listening for your spouse. I hope they're listening today. Because we always think the problem is them. It's always their fault. It's never our fault. We have an amazing self-preserving bias towards ourselves. We're never wrong. It's always everybody else that's wrong. Don't do that today. I want you to listen for yourself. Listen for yourself. Here's another thing for us to kind of consider. We actually want things in our marriage that are good and right, but we try to go about getting them in the wrong ways. Think about that. Really deep down, when we're angry, when a lot of times even when we're angry and lashing out, we actually want something good and different in our marriage. We're just going about getting it the wrong way because it's really all we know how to do for a lot of us. We manipulate or control, complain, blame, attack, nag, yell, get angry, use outbursts, demands, threats, or we withdraw, we stonewall, shut down, become distant, give the silent treatment. See, but these are all fleshly methods. But for many of us, this is kind of all we know. These are the only points of reference that we have to get what we want. We're trying to get what we want, but we're going about getting it in the wrong way. Wives, if you show disrespect in an attempt to motivate your husband to be more loving, it won't work. I'm going to use, Jerry used to say this all the time, never in the history of mankind has that ever worked. If you're going to try to motivate your husband to be more loving by being disrespectful towards him, it won't work. It'll never work. Well, you don't care. You're so selfish. How's that going to motivate me to be more loving towards you? Husbands, has getting angry and attacking, exerting dominance or shutting down and giving up, has that ever worked? You might win the battle, but you're losing the war. You're losing your wife's respect. Do negative approaches lead to positive change? No, they don't work. They don't work, but it's all we know. We continue to live this way and think this way and react this way, and we end up in what this author calls the crazy cycle. We end up in the crazy cycle as couples. Let's go ahead and put that picture up on the screen. Here's what's happening in the crazy cycle. Without love, when a wife does not feel loved by her husband, what does she do? She reacts without respect. And without respect, what does that husband do? When he doesn't feel respected, when he feels disrespected, he reacts without love. And this just goes on and on and on, and it begins to spiral out of control. And we go down to this deep, dark place where we just are hurting each other and wounding each other. And those wounds last a lot of times for a lifetime in this crazy cycle. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been there? Here is, I think, why we end up in this place so often. And this is something that Ray says here a lot of times, but it's just so true. We are more concerned with who's right and who's wrong than what is best. We're more concerned with who's right and who's wrong than actually what's best for this relationship, right? Well, I've got to stand my ground and I've got to be right. I don't care what you're saying. I've got to be right. And never mind, she's got to do the same thing. I've got to stand my ground. Neither one of us cares in this moment what's actually best and most beneficial for the relationship. We're most concerned about right and wrong, who's right and who's wrong, defending ourselves. And really, that's at the root of most of our problems. In James chapter 4, what causes fights and quarrels among you. We're not getting our way. Really, when it's all just simplified and boiled down, we don't get our own way. And that makes us upset. We fight tooth and nail. We defend, we yell, we scream, we hurl insults, we disrespect and make our spouse feel unloved because our pride, our selfishness, and our ego refuses to yield. That's just honest today. Our pride, our ego refuses to yield. When he feels put down, disrespected, guess how he's going to react? With zero love, with zero affection. And when she is hurting and insecure, when she feels unloved, guess what? She doesn't give the respect that you need. And so we just keep spinning around on this crazy cycle. So the question becomes for us today, who will break the cycle? Who is willing to break the cycle? Do what is best for the relationship. Who's going to be willing to do that? To do what's best? Because here's what we need to understand. Winning or losing is never the goal. It's not the goal. Oneness is. Oneness is. Doing what's best is always the goal. So who's going to be the one who takes the step? Who's going to be the initiator? Begin to do it God's way. Now, in a perfect world, husbands would do that, right? Because we're the spiritual leaders. So in a perfect world, you wives could depend on your husbands to do that. It doesn't always happen that way, but let's just start with husbands today. Husbands, verse 25. Let's back up to verse 25. Paul writes, husbands, love your wives. How should we love our wives? Just as Christ loved the church, and he gave up his life for her. To make her holy, verse 26, and clean, washed by the cleansing of God's word. That word love here that's used is actually the word agape. And if you've been in church long enough, you've heard that word before. It's the word used in the New Testament to describe love. It's the word used to describe the love of God. It's not physical attraction. It's not a feeling. It's a commitment to do things that benefit the one who is loved. You see the difference here? That's a huge difference than just feelings, attraction. This is a commitment. It's a choice to do things that benefits the one who is loved. Husbands, agape your wives just as Christ loved the church. How did Jesus love his church, this movement that he launched? He protected it. He prayed for it. He guarded it. And ultimately, he gave his life for her. So, what does this sacrificial love look like for our wives in practical terms? See, we can talk concepts all day, but what does this type of love look like in practical terms? Here's what I want everybody to know. On your way out, in the entryway, there's a little table right by those double doors, and there are some handouts that say for women at the top, and there's some handouts that say for men at the top. So as you're leaving today, there are some great resources. Find the one that you need. For women, it's going to show you some really practical ways. How can I be more respectful to my husband? Pick that up, take it home with you, and really pray over it and read it. For men, find that one. How can I be more loving to my wife? Pick it up. It's got great suggestions from this book. So what does this look like? This sacrificial love look like for our wives in practical terms? And really, it goes back to that word affection, right? If that's the number one need. But what is affection? What does affection look like? Well, she wants to be close to you. And here's kind of the parentheses there, in a non-sexual way. And my question is, how's that even possible? No, I'm just joking, right? Without the grabbing and the groping, right? She just wants to be close to you. She wants you to open up to her. Ugh. You know, like This doesn't come naturally to us, does it? I mean, maybe some of you guys it does, but like even as I read that, it's just like, man, what? How am I supposed to do that? Okay, she wants you to open up to her. For you, all right, here's the easier one. For you to apologize when you're wrong. For you to apologize. For you to seek her out. Run an errand or help with the dishes. Make it a priority to spend time with her. She wants you to listen and not try to fix her. To be honest and loyal to her. To encourage her. See, all of these things make our wives feel loved. To know that you're committed to her above all others and that you're going to honor and cherish her, right? She's the most important person in your life. These practical ways, these are practical ways to help your wife feel like she's loved, to help her feel secure in the relationship. Now, I want to encourage you to have a conversation with your wife maybe sometime and ask her, all right, those were some overarching things, but what are the specific things that I can do for you to make you feel more loved as a husband, right? Because it might be different for everybody. So I've actually had this conversation with Meredith before, and so I know some very specific things for her that she needs. Here's what she's told me. I want you to date me. Right? You need to continue to date me, take me out on dates. And I'm confessing today, it's a challenge. When you got a full-time job, when you got 4 kids, to really carve out that time that I want you to take me out on a date every once in a while. I want you to pray with me. That's an easier one. Pray with me. She said, compliment me. Help me. When you see I'm overwhelmed, help me. Help me. I need to hear kind words from you. I want to feel appreciated like you think of me. So those were some very, very specific ways that Meredith told me, but what is it for your wife? What does it look like? You need to have that conversation with her so you can know. In other words, here's what we're talking about. We need to be able to put her emotional needs first. How can I put her first? We want to treat our wives as if she is more important than us. That's difficult, isn't it? That's hard because we're selfish. We just want what we want. And it's not, I'll put you first as long as I think you're worthy of being put first. I'm going to decide based on your behavior how you're treating me. And if you're treating me right, then maybe I'll do some of these things. That's not agape love. It's not based on their behavior or if they're worthy of receiving this kind of love. See, God's love is completely different than the world's love. The world says, I'll love you if you're worth loving. God says, I love you even when you're at your worst. The world says, I'll love you if you love me. God says, I love you unconditionally. This law of Christ that we find in the New Testament, in this new covenant, is that we are to love one another the way that God through Christ loved us. Love one another the way that God through Christ loved us. How do we love? There's the picture. That's where we always go back. This is where we take our relational cues from. We love as He loved us, as He loved the church and gave His life for her. Now, when husbands refuse to love their wives this way, it looks a little bit like this, right? When they don't feel loved, when they feel insecure, this is what it can look like. He is independent, right? He's more concerned with just doing his own thing, not really helping at home, stonewalling, shut off, always trying to fix her, offer solutions, unwilling to ask for forgiveness, to tell her I was wrong. Oftentimes he has wandering eyes. Lust is an issue, and he puts other things before her and the family. The result of that She feels unloved. She gets angry because she's hurting and insecure. So what does she do? She attacks. She attacks. She belittles. She may take her focus completely off you and put it on the kids. And she may even end up taking out the frustration that she has towards you on the kids. She's oftentimes disgusted by her spouse and doesn't give the respect that he needs. And guess where we end up? In the crazy cycle. And our marriages are terrible. And we're like, is this ever going to be different? How can we ever do things differently? Wives, how can you do what's best and take the initiative? How can you, because sometimes your husband is not going to help get you off the crazy cycle. You're going to have to be the one that initiates and do what is best for the relationships. What do you do to get off the crazy cycle? You respect your husband. I ain't doing that. He doesn't deserve that. Are you going to continue to do it your way, or are you willing to do it God's way? That's really an important question for us today. Are we willing to do it God's way? But it's hard when I feel like they haven't earned it or deserve it. And that's true. But don't we receive the love of God when we don't earn it? And we really don't deserve it. And he just pours out that love on us. What does this respect for your husband look like in practical terms? No matter how you're feeling, right? And that's important. No matter how you're feeling, what does this respect look like? There's handouts for you ladies as well, but here's what it can look like. He needs you to support and encourage him, to appreciate his desire to work hard and provide, to serve and lead. He wants you to let him make decisions, for you to trust him, and for you to be his friend. He needs your admiration and praise. He also wants you to appreciate his desire for sexual intimacy, for you to understand he needs sexual fulfillment just as much as you need affection. Now, I want to encourage you wives to do the same exercise with your husbands. Ask him, what specifically does he need to feel respected? What are some things? Help me know really some concrete ways I can help you feel respected in this relationship. Here were some of mine for Meredith. Trust my decision making. Trust my relationship with God and my decision making in this relationship. Appreciate my desire to work hard and provide for our family. Tell me when I'm a good dad. Right? Not just all the times I'm a bad dad. Notice when I'm a good dad and let me know. And then really appreciate my need for physical intimacy in the relationship. That's a huge need. So recognize that and please help me in that. When wives refuse to respect her husband, here's what it looks like. It looks a little bit like this. She is unsupportive of his endeavors and belittling of his abilities. She's undermining, constantly questioning his decisions and resistant to his counsel. She's unfriendly, right? She's just hard to live with, unfriendly, attacking, unwilling to spend time together, and disinterested in physical intimacy. And the result? He gets angry, lashes out, or he shuts down, gives up, becomes distant, works even more. Why? Because men, we need worth. As men, we need worth. And if I don't feel that worth coming from my spouse, I've got to find it from somewhere. So I work more because that's where I'm finding my worth. But then guess what? That takes me away from the relationship that you need. Why are you always working? Because I'm not getting the respect I need at home. I don't feel worth at home, so I'm actually finding it in my work. Works even more, self-medicates with TV or food or lust, pornography, alcohol, and he doesn't give her the love that she needs. And the cycle continues, right? Is this hitting any of us where we live? This is definitely hitting me today. And this cycle continues unless, wives, that you're willing to say, enough is enough. We're not going to keep doing it this way, living this way. I'm not going to continue reacting this way. I'm going to do what's best for this relationship and show my husband respect. I'm not going to berate and belittle him. I'm going to use respectful words and a respectful tone of voice. I'm going to soften my body language and facial expressions. I'm going to stop rolling my eyes. In other words, I'm going to put him first. Marriage is discipleship. What we're talking about today is discipleship. Putting someone else first, their interests, their needs ahead of our own. I'm not going to treat him the way that he deserves to be treated. He deserves to be treated this way. But I'm not going to treat him like that. I'm going to treat him the way that God, through Christ, treated me. With love and grace. I'm going to choose to respect my husband in spite of my feelings. There was a time in our relationship that we were struggling. Meredith and I were struggling, and she actually did this for me in spite of her feelings. See, I didn't deserve the respect at this time. I didn't. I was selfish. I didn't deserve for her to respect me. Yet she chose during that difficult time in our marriage. I don't care. He doesn't deserve it. But I'm going to show respect to him. And she actually started leaving me notes around the house. And I still have those. I want to share just a few of those with you today. She wrote, I respect you for showing me I really was worth something. She said, I respect you because you work all day and then come home and play with our boys even though I know you're tired. See, we didn't even have little girls at that time. She said, I respect you because you give your all to every project and you always go far beyond what is required. She said, I respect you because I know you desire God's best for our family, and I can trust that you are always seeking His will for our lives. I respect you for having self-control and not saying to me what I know has to cross your mind. I respect you for seeing past my many mistakes and flaws and loving me. And see, what this did in that difficult time in our relationship was begin really a healing process. And for me to even recognize, you want to talk about ashes being heaped on my head and recognizing, wow, I've got to turn and face what I'm doing wrong in this relationship. And I need to focus on who I need to be to my wife. And what happened during this time was when we began to understand these concepts of love and respect, we were able to start moving off of the crazy cycle and enter into what the author calls the energizing cycle. Let's put that picture up on the screen. His love begins to motivate her respect, and as she shows respect, guess what? That motivates his love towards her. And now she's feeling loved. So guess what? Wow, that motivates me to respect my husband. So now we're in this energizing cycle in our relationship. See, we've got to understand today that men run on respect and women live on love. It's like the air that we need to breathe. That's how important these two things are in our lives, in our marriages, in our relationships. They're potent, they're powerful to produce change. That's why we have this verse, that's why we have these commands. So the key to keeping conflict from escalating is to choose to practice love and respect. Are we going to start doing things differently? See, we got to start putting this into practice if we're ever going to get off the crazy cycle. We got to understand that in conflict, my response is my responsibility. Okay, how I respond, that's my responsibility. My unloving words, my disrespectful words are my responsibility. Now, I hear some of y'all blowing me off. Well, if only she weren't so sensitive. Or if only he wasn't so touchy. But really, those aren't the issues at all. Those aren't the real issues at all. Conflict inevitably happens when spouses focus on their needs and overlook the needs of the other. That's when the issues arise. So just for a moment, let's do an exercise. I want you to think back to before you were married, when you were dating, when you were in pursuit of your spouse. Do you remember what you did? You remember some of the things that you did when you were in pursuit? You treated them like they were the most important person in the world, didn't you? Like they were the most important person in the world because you're trying to win their heart. It's real simple. Do that again. Start doing that again. Return to your first love. Go back and start doing the things that you did at first. What can I do for you? How can I be there for you? How can I make your life easier? How can I prioritize your thing over my thing? How can I put you first? Now, this runs completely contrary to our self-centeredness, doesn't it? To my busyness, my schedule, and my sense of self-importance. Why would I do that? Because that's what Jesus did for us. That's what Jesus did for us. Real love is putting others first. He put me first, so I'm going to do that for my spouse. Karen shared something on Friday I think was just so practical in what we're talking about today. She heard a talk by Brené Brown. Some of y'all may know that name. She's done several TED Talks. But she said this idea of 50-50 in marriage, that's hogwash, right? That's not real. 50-50 doesn't exist. Here's how it really works in real life. Some days, you've only got about 25%. Some days, that's all I got. And you need, in those days, to actually let your spouse know that. See, that's where the communication comes in. This is all I got today. I got about 25%. And some days your spouse is going to be able to say, that's all right, I feel good. I'm going to pick up that extra 75%. But other days, you're going to come in and you say, today I'm at about 10%. And your spouse is going to say the exact same thing. Sorry, honey, but I'm at about that same percentage. And at that point, here's where it gets really practical. You've got to make a plan at that point because you're tired, you're worn out, you're stressed. What are we going to do on a day like today where none of us have that much to give? What are we going to do to avoid hurting each other and making the situation worse? Maybe that's it for that day. Yeah, you got to get real practical. Maybe it's about taking a nap. Maybe you have got to decide. You got to make a plan. Otherwise, you're going to react, you're going to hurt each other, and you're not going to show grace. So how do we begin to really communicate more and help each other? Put our spouse first, what they need ahead of our own needs. But here's a question, but what if I do my part and they don't do theirs? I know that's got to be in some of your heads. What if I do my part, but they don't do theirs? And here's just the reality. Sometimes a husband will not show love for his wife no matter how hard she tries to respect him. And sometimes a wife will not show respect for her husband no matter how hard he tries to show her love. And when this is the case, you move to what this author calls the rewarded cycle. Let's bring the rewarded cycle up on the screen. Now, this is another level, I'm telling you today. This is another level. In the rewarded cycle, his love blesses regardless of her respect. And her respect blesses regardless of his love. Even though your spouse may not deserve love and respect, you will not become an unloving and disrespectful person in reaction to them. Why in the world would I do that? Why would I ever do that? Because ultimately, we do what we do as if we're doing it for Christ. Can we do that? Is that even possible? I'm really not getting anything out of this, but I'm doing what I'm doing as unto Christ. Ephesians 5:22 tells wives to submit to their husbands as to the Lord. Ephesians 5:25 tells husbands to love their wives just as Christ loved the church. You see, he's always in the center of the relationship. He's got to be there, whether we realize that or not. He's got to be the focus and at the center of our relationship. Why is it called the rewarded cycle? Ephesians 6:7-8 says, serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving who? The Lord. Not people, because you know that the Lord, and here's the word for us, will reward each one for whatever good that they do. As if you were serving the Lord. Now, this truth applies to wives and husbands, and one day, if you do what you're supposed to do, you're going to receive the ultimate reward when he says, well done, good and faithful servant. That couldn't have been easy. That couldn't have been easy. But you did it as unto me. Well done. You are faithful. A husband says, I will put on love toward you because I'm really loving Christ. I will obey Ephesians 5:33 that commands me to love because I love the Lord. I'm showing my love for God as I put on love for you. A wife says, I will put on respect toward you because I am really reverencing Christ. I will obey Ephesians 5:33 that commands me to put on respect because I reverence the Lord. I'm showing my reverence for God as I put on respect for you. Remember that in the ultimate sense, your marriage is more than about just you and your spouse. It has everything to do with your relationship with Jesus. It's about discipleship. Whenever you practice love or respect, your goal isn't even simply just to get off the crazy cycle. Or it's not to motivate your spouse to meet your needs. Ultimately, we're practicing love and respect because standing just beyond our spouse is Jesus. And you envision the time when you will see him face to face and realize that your marriage was really his way of testing and growing you to have more love and reverence for him. See, our lives are really about learning how to love. That's what life's about, learning how to love God and others. So we let Jesus and his life, his example, dictate how we treat one another. How did he treat people? He forgives the unforgivable. He embraces the unembraceable. He never plays the God card for his own benefit, even though he could. Even though he had every right, he never plays the God card for his benefit. He didn't give us what we deserved. He submitted to God and laid down his life for us. He loved selflessly. He put me first, so I'm going to put you first. I'm going to love you the way that he loved me because as 1 Corinthians 13:2 says, without love, without agape, I'm nothing. I'm nothing without love. And marriage is where we can learn the most about love. I'm telling you, as we close today, selfish love won't last. It can't last. It won't weather the storms because it's based on feelings. It's focused on what the other person does for us. It endures only as long as its needs are met. Human love says, what can I get? And agape asks, what can I give? Human love says, how do I feel? Agape asks, what can I do? It's a lifelong commitment to sacrificial action. I love this definition that says a Christian marriage is two people submitted to God, deferring to one another. Right? And really, that phrase, two people, it's got to be both of you. You got to both be willing to go all in. Two people submitted to God, deferring to one another. And when I start to say no to myself and yes to you, and you start to say no to yourself and yes to me, something powerful starts happening. What do you need? What can I do for you? If we'll do life this way, if we'll begin to do life and relationships and marriage this way, Jesus really will make your life better. He'll make you better at life. It'll make you a better husband, wife, fiance, friend, boyfriend, girlfriend. And in the end, you're going to have a stronger and better relationship. That's my prayer for all of you today. Let me pray for you.